Watch today's video until the end, because there is information at the end that not everyone knows. And subscribe to the channel now to get such videos regularly. Did YNR spend months on Phyllis and Victor only to reset everything? On the June 4th episode of The Young and the Restless, Phyllis signed Newman Enterprises back over to Victor, who toasted his success, gloated, and didn't even pretend to be humble while his children tripped over each other to tell Victor what a great man and dad he was. Everything returned to the status quo. So what was the point of this whole storyline? The winner takes it all. Victor, Eric Braden, was furious when Phyllis, Michelle Stafford, used trickery and deception to take his company away from him. So Victor used trickery and deception to get it back. It's okay when he does it. Sure, Victor suffered for a few weeks, but in the end, he got back everything he lost and even more, Phyllis's humiliation. As Phyllis lamented to Michael, Christian LeBlanc, she is actually worse off than she started, having lost Newman Enterprises and now having her children hate her. Michael pointed out that, since she did what her children tried to nag her into doing, they'll soon forgive her. So she's back to where she was before, too. Drama class. In real life, things happen for no reason all the time. But that's not supposed to be the case in drama. Stories are supposed to have a point and consequences. This story had no point and no consequences. We might believe it was worth it if Nikki, Melody Thomas Scott, keeps being mad at Victor. But Nikki isn't mad about this. She's mad about Victor's treatment of Jack, Peter Bergman, which was only tangentially related to getting his company back. So we can't even hope this story was meant to break up Nikki and Victor forever. Because now that his children worship him again, Nikki can't be far behind. Did YNR spend months on Phyllis and Victor only to reset everything? For months, The Young and the Restless appeared to be building towards something massive between Phyllis Summers and Victor Newman. Every tense conversation, every reluctant alliance, and every moment of mutual respect seemed to suggest that Genoa City's most unpredictable redhead and its most powerful patriarch were headed for a game-changing partnership. Fans watched carefully as the show layered scene after scene that hinted at a new dynamic, one that could reshape the balance of power in town. But now, many viewers are asking a frustrating question: did YNR spend all that time developing Phyllis and Victor only to reset everything back to square one? It's a question that's becoming harder to ignore. When Phyllis found herself backed into increasingly difficult situations, Victor emerged as an unexpected figure in her orbit. While they were never exactly friends, there was a growing sense that the two characters were beginning to understand each other in ways they hadn't before. Victor respected survivors, and Phyllis certainly fit that description. Likewise, Phyllis understood power, manipulation, and ambition better than most people in Genoa City. Their similarities created compelling television. Neither character plays by conventional rules. Neither apologizes for wanting more. Both are willing to make controversial choices when they believe the ends justify the means. In many ways, Victor and Phyllis are cut from similar cloth, which is precisely why their interactions felt so electric. The show seemed to recognize this. Scene after scene emphasized their shared worldview. Victor occasionally treated Phyllis with a level of respect he rarely extends to outsiders. Phyllis, meanwhile, appeared willing to listen to Victor's advice even when she publicly pushed back against him. Their conversations carried weight because they weren't merely exchanging information. They were testing each other, evaluating each other's strengths and weaknesses. Fans began speculating about where it was all leading. Would Victor eventually take Phyllis under his wing? Could she become one of his most trusted allies? Might she even help him execute one of his larger schemes against his enemies? The possibilities seemed endless. Instead of immediately turning them into enemies, the writers appeared interested in exploring the gray area between friendship and rivalry. It was a refreshing direction because YNR often falls into familiar patterns where characters quickly return to old conflicts. This time felt different. Or at least it did. Recently, however, the momentum behind the Phyllis Victor storyline seems to have stalled dramatically. Rather than continuing to build upon their evolving relationship, the show appears to be steering both characters back toward their traditional roles. Victor is once again focused on being Victor. He's manipulating situations from behind the scenes. He's orchestrating power plays. He's targeting people he views as threats. He's operating according to the same playbook he's used for decades. Meanwhile, Phyllis is once again fighting for relevance, scrambling to prove herself, and finding herself isolated from potential allies. Sound familiar? That's because it's essentially the same position both characters occupied before their recent interactions gained momentum. The result is a growing feeling among viewers that the show may have hit the reset button. If that's truly what's happening, it's disappointing not because the current stories are necessarily bad but because they seem to ignore months of character development that had genuine potential. One of the biggest strengths of soap operas is their ability to evolve relationships over time. Characters don't need to remain locked into the same dynamics forever. In fact, some of the most memorable soap stories emerge when longtime enemies become allies or when unexpected partnerships challenge viewers' expectations. Victor and Phyllis represented exactly that opportunity. The chemistry between them wasn't romantic. It didn't need to be. Instead, it was built on mutual recognition. Victor saw someone who refused to stay down no matter how many setbacks she endured. Phyllis saw someone who never stopped fighting for control. Those similarities created a fascinating foundation that deserved exploration. Imagine the possibilities. A truly united Victor and Phyllis could have become one of the most formidable alliances in Genoa city history. Together, they possess enough intelligence, determination, and strategic thinking to outmaneuver almost anyone. Jack Abbott would have been forced to pay attention. Billy Abbott would have been nervous. Adam Newman might have found himself competing with an entirely new power player. Even Nicky Newman could have questioned whether Victor's growing trust in Phyllis was wise. The storytelling opportunities were enormous. Instead, viewers are watching the relationship drift backward. Every time Victor dismisses Phyllis or every time Phyllis returns to operating on the fringes, it feels as though the previous months are being quietly erased. That's especially frustrating because Phyllis herself desperately needs a storyline that reflects her intelligence and experience. For years, the character has bounced between redemption arcs, romantic complications, and personal crises. While those stories have their place, they often fail to capitalize on what makes Phyllis unique. She's a survivor. She's resourceful. She's dangerous when underestimated. The recent Victor storyline seemed poised to remind viewers of those qualities. By positioning Phyllis closer to Victor's world, the show elevated her status. She wasn't merely reacting to events. She was becoming part of the power structure driving those events. That distinction matters. Characters become more compelling when they influence the story rather than simply respond to it. For a brief period, it appeared that Phyllis was moving into that category. Now, the show risks undoing that progress. Of course, it's possible that appearances are deceiving. YNR has a history of playing long games with certain storylines. What looks like a reset today could ultimately serve a larger purpose tomorrow. Victor may be testing Phyllis. Phyllis may be positioning herself strategically. The writers may be laying groundwork for a future twist that hasn't yet become apparent. Soap fans know better than anyone that patience can sometimes be rewarded. Still, viewers are justified in feeling concerned. Television storytelling relies on momentum. When a storyline builds anticipation for months and then suddenly changes direction, audiences naturally wonder whether the original plan has been abandoned. The Phyllis-Victor dynamic generated excitement because it felt fresh. It felt unpredictable. Most importantly, it felt earned. Neither character changed overnight. Their evolving relationship developed gradually through shared experiences and carefully constructed interactions. That's why so many fans invested in it. And that's why the current direction feels puzzling. If the goal was always to return Victor and Phyllis to their familiar roles, what was the purpose of spending so much time establishing something new? Why create expectations only to reverse course? Why tease a powerful alliance if the story never intends to fully explore it? These questions continue to circulate among fans as the show moves forward. The answer may ultimately depend on what happens next. If Victor and Phyllis eventually reconnect in a meaningful way, the recent setbacks could simply be another chapter in a larger narrative. Temporary conflict often strengthens relationships in soap storytelling. However, if the show permanently abandons their evolving dynamic, viewers may look back on the past several months as a missed opportunity. And that would be unfortunate. Because beneath the power struggles, betrayals, and endless scheming lies a simple truth. Victor Newman and Phyllis Summers bring out something interesting in each other. They challenge each other. They understand each other. They operate according to similar rules while pretending otherwise. That combination is television gold. The Young and the Restless spent months convincing viewers that these two complicated characters were headed towards something significant. Whether that destination was friendship, partnership, manipulation, or outright war almost didn't matter. The journey itself was compelling. Now the show faces a critical choice. Continue building on the foundation it carefully constructed or erase it in favor of familiar territory. Fans are watching closely to see which path YNR chooses. Because if all those months of development ultimately lead nowhere, viewers may be left wondering whether one of the show's most intriguing character dynamics was sacrificed just when it was becoming truly interesting. The deeper issue isn't simply whether Victor and Phyllis become allies. It's whether the Young and the Restless is willing to allow either character to evolve in meaningful ways. Victor Newman has spent decades as the unquestioned king of Genoa City. He wins battles, loses battles, destroys enemies, rebuilds empires, and somehow always ends up exactly where he started, on top. That's part of what makes him an iconic character. Fans expect Victor to be powerful, intimidating, and impossible to defeat. Yet even legendary characters need growth. That's why the Phyllis storyline felt so promising. Unlike many people in Victor's life, Phyllis isn't intimidated by him. She never has been. She doesn't automatically worship him the way some characters do, nor does she obsessively try to destroy him the way others have. Instead, she treats Victor as what he is, a powerful man who can be useful, dangerous, or both depending on the situation. That perspective is rare. Victor's family members often become trapped in emotional cycles with him. His business rivals frequently underestimate him. His enemies become consumed by revenge. Phyllis operates differently. She's practical. She's opportunistic. She's willing to work with almost anyone if it benefits her. Those traits should make her incredibly valuable to Victor. In fact, there were moments over the past several months when it seemed Victor recognized exactly that. The subtle shift was fascinating. Rather than viewing Phyllis as a nuisance or a wild card, Victor began treating her like someone whose talents could actually be useful. It wasn't trust in the traditional sense. Victor rarely trusts anyone completely. But it was respect. And for Victor Newman, respect is often more valuable than affection. That's what made the storyline stand out. Viewers weren't watching two people become friends. They were watching two master survivors acknowledge each other's strengths. Soap operas thrive on complicated relationships, and few relationships are more complicated than one built on mutual admiration mixed with constant suspicion. Every scene between Victor and Phyllis carried that tension. Would they help each other? Would they betray each other? Would they form an alliance? Would they become enemies? The uncertainty kept viewers engaged. Now that uncertainty seems to be disappearing. Instead of moving forward, the relationship appears trapped in reverse. The show keeps circling back to familiar patterns where Victor holds all the power while Phyllis struggles to find her footing. That dynamic can work in small doses. The problem is that fans have already seen it. Repeatedly. For years. What made the recent storyline exciting was the possibility that the balance was changing. Not completely. Not permanently. But enough to create something new. Phyllis wasn't merely reacting to Victor's decisions anymore. She seemed capable of influencing them. That's a major distinction. Strong soap characters need agency. They need the ability to affect the story around them. Without that agency, even popular characters can begin to feel repetitive. Unfortunately, that's been one of the recurring challenges for Phyllis in recent years. She's often positioned as a disruptor rather than a power player. She creates chaos. She sparks drama. She reacts emotionally. Then she spends months dealing with the consequences. While those stories generate conflict, they don't always maximize the character's potential. Phyllis is at her best when she's dangerous. Not physically dangerous. Strategically dangerous. The version of Phyllis that fans fell in love with wasn't someone constantly scrambling to recover from mistakes. It was someone who could outthink her opponents. Someone who could manipulate situations to her advantage. Someone who could walk into a room filled with powerful people and make them nervous. That's the version viewers glimpsed during her interactions with Victor. For the first time in a long time, Phyllis felt relevant to the show's larger power structure. She wasn't just participating in stories. She was helping drive them. That shift created excitement because it suggested a brighter future for the character. Now that future feels uncertain. What's particularly frustrating is that YNR has invested significant screen time developing this connection. Storytelling is all about payoff. When writers spend months planting seeds, viewers naturally expect those seeds to grow into something meaningful. Otherwise, why plant them at all? Imagine if Victor suddenly abandoned one of his major corporate schemes without explanation. Imagine if a murder mystery ended without revealing the killer. Imagine if a romance built anticipation for months only for both characters to pretend nothing happened. Fans would feel cheated. The same principle applies here. The show encouraged viewers to care about the Victor-Phyllis dynamic. It highlighted their similarities. It emphasized their interactions. It teased future possibilities. As a result, audiences became invested. That's why the apparent reset feels so noticeable. It's not simply about changing direction. It's about abandoning momentum. Momentum is one of the most valuable resources in serialized storytelling. Once audiences become excited about a relationship or storyline, writers have an opportunity to build upon that enthusiasm. The smartest soap stories often recognize when viewers respond positively to unexpected combinations. Sometimes those combinations become legendary. Many of daytime television's greatest partnerships weren't planned years in advance. They emerged because writers recognized chemistry and adjusted accordingly. Victor and Phyllis may never become one of the genre's iconic duos. But they certainly possess the ingredients necessary for compelling television. The chemistry exists. The history exists. The conflict exists. The mutual respect exists. The question is whether YNR is willing to capitalize on those strengths. There are still countless directions the show could explore. Perhaps Victor eventually offers Phyllis a genuine opportunity. Perhaps Phyllis uncovers information that makes her indispensable. Perhaps they find themselves facing a common enemy. Perhaps their uneasy alliance evolves into something neither of them expected. Any of those scenarios could reignite the storyline. The foundation remains intact. What's missing is forward movement. Without progress, even the strongest character dynamics eventually lose their impact. Fans don't necessarily need Victor and Phyllis to become best friends. They don't need them to agree on everything. They don't even need them to remain allies permanently. What viewers want is evolution. They want consequences. They want character development that matters. Most importantly, they want stories that reward investment. The past several months encouraged viewers to believe Victor and Phyllis were headed toward a significant turning point. Now the show must decide whether that turning point was real or merely an illusion. If it was real, exciting possibilities remain ahead. If it was an illusion, many fans may conclude that YNR spent months building anticipation for a destination it never intended to reach. And in a genre built on long-term storytelling, that's a risk the show can hardly afford to take. The coming weeks may provide the answer. Will Victor and Phyllis continue drifting back toward familiar territory? Or will the writers finally deliver the payoff they've been teasing for?